Ray. I work for the Arizona Wilderness Coalition. We are a statewide nonprofit organization, and as you probably guess from our name, our work focuses on wilderness areas as well as wild and scenic rivers. So I'm going to start briefly just mentioning my organization. If you're interested to find out more and become involved in things we're doing on the Tonto National Forest, I'll be here afterwards. I have some information over there. If you want to see a map of all the wilderness areas in Arizona, that's part of the information I brought tonight. So briefly, I'll just again say I work for the Arizona Wilderness Coalition. We've been around since 1979. We've been involved in some of the legislation that passed to create some of the wilderness areas in the state. Today, we're primarily a stewardship organization, meaning we get people from the public involved and do things in wilderness areas. All sorts of projects that I can discuss at another time. The reason that they asked me to come and speak tonight is that we are a partner with the Tonto National Forest, so we have an agreement with them, and we carry out activities and projects in the forest and get members of the public engaged and educated on wilderness and wild and scenic river issues. As Greg pointed out earlier, there's 8 wilderness areas on this forest. I think everyone can probably see this map, so I'll show you generally. You've got the Superstition Wilderness, Four Peaks Wilderness, Salt River Canyon Wilderness, Sierra Luncheon Wilderness, Saladry Wilderness, Hell's Gate Wilderness, the very large Monzal or Matazel Wilderness, depending on how you pronounce it, and then half of the Pine Mountain Wilderness, which is also on the Prescott National Forest. In total, there's about 590,000 acres. So on this 3.1 million acre forest, that's about 19% of the forest is designated wilderness areas. Greg also mentioned some other designated areas, and one that often gets confused with wilderness are inventory roadless areas. They're not the same. There's a lot of differences. You can have motorized trails in inventory roadless areas and a lot of other things that aren't allowed in wilderness areas. The wilderness areas were designated by the Wilderness Act, or the 2 pieces of legislation we had in Arizona, the 84 Wilderness Act and the 1990 Desert Wilderness Act, that were sponsored by some of our more notable congresspeople like Senator Barry Goldwater, Congressman Mo Udall, and at the time, Congressman McCain before he became Senator McCain. So in the Tonto National Forest, we were asked to speak as a partner organization. As you saw from Greg's slideshow, one of the trends that has been occurring with the National Forest is they have decreasing budgets, less staff, and more work to do. So one of the ways they're finding out how to meet the needs of all these things they're supposed to be doing is turning to groups like mine to help them out with some of these projects. So my organization has a program called the Wilderness Stewardship Program. We get members of the public involved. They come out on trips with us to do stewardship projects. They can also become trained to go on their own and do the same type of work. The type of projects we do range from sometimes trail maintenance, sign installation, just monitoring work, getting rid of non-native plants, hauling out garbage, and as of recently, we've had a stat of putting out abandoned campfires. We actually put out an abandoned campfire 5 days before the slide fire started, just about a mile away from where the slide fire did start. So just to give you an idea of some of the things we do. In wilderness areas, oftentimes, as in this meeting, you saw it's a recreation as well as a designated areas meeting. Wilderness areas are often thought of as a recreation designation, but that's just one part of what wilderness areas are designated for. Other things that wilderness areas benefit the public for or are useful for, they're sources for clean water, they're sources for game and wildlife to reproduce so that we have healthy populations to hunt or to view or photograph. They're places for clean air. They're places for people to go recreate. There are also places where we have ranching facilities in wilderness areas. So there's a lot of uses going on in our wilderness areas in the Tonto National Forest. I know that I'm pretty tight on time. A few more minutes? A couple more? Okay. So those are the wilderness areas in the Tonto. My organization, the Arizona Wilderness Coalition. Just a little bit of background information on wilderness because I'm sure there'll be more time to talk afterwards. Does anybody have any questions for me on what my organization does or wilderness areas? Things coming up or things already happened on the forest? I must have explained it very well then.
What did you say the total acreage was for?
I'm sorry, what?
Did you say what the total acreage was for wilderness?
Wilderness areas, about 590,000 acres on the Tonto Forest, which is 3.1 million acres.
How does that work as far as an average amount, 17 or 18% comparable nationwide in larger forests?
compared to other forests, what's the average percentage of wilderness areas? Geez, I don't know an average on that. Just off the top of my head, quickly doing some figures for some of the forests I know in Arizona, it's about there on the average. It's probably a little bit higher than some of the forests, like the Prescott that I know of, and Coconino as well. But those forests are also smaller and have a significant amount of wilderness acres. So it's about the same, at least that I know in Arizona.
Just because I'm unfamiliar with the Wilderness Coalition, does the group support or oppose wildlife water catchments on wilderness areas, man-made?
Support them?
Yes.
Well, our first priority is proper management of the wilderness and getting people involved with it. So we've done all types of wildlife-related work. We were involved with a tank refurbished in Warm Springs Wilderness, the temporary tank refurbished. We just did some wildlife projects in Fossil Springs Wilderness area. We also did some fence installation, which might seem a bit strange, but we installed fences in Warm Springs Wilderness for wildlife, for bighorn sheep, that was in cooperation with Arizona Desert Bighorn Sheep Society. So we don't, and as a general rule, oppose or support any of those things on a case-by-case basis on what they want to do and how they want to do it. Any questions?
Any other questions for Sam?
How many people do you have in your organization?
How many members do we have?
Yes.
About 2,500, and that's a mix of people who just maybe donate money or people who come out with us on the ground and do activities.